What's up? It's Andrea. Today, a homing beacon freaks us out. Picard doesn't want to have sex with Dr. Pulaski, and we ask the question, what does a transporter chief do all day? Stay tuned to find out.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we're talking about Season 2, Episode 2, entitled Where Silence Has Lease.
Potentially the worst title ever.
It's actually taken from a poem, but I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, but I didn't write down the name of the poem, so maybe bad co-host on me, shame on me, but I didn't write down the name of the poem. But yeah, Where Silence Has Lease is a line from a poem. It's written by Jack B. Sowards and directed by Winrich Kolbe, which is a very cool sounding name. The star date kicking off this episode is 42193.6. Let me just jump right into our synopsis. While on a charting mission, the Enterprise discovers a zone of pure blackness in space. Any probes launched into the area simply disappear. As they study it further, the zone expands and envelops the Enterprise, leaving them in a black void with sensors reporting complete nothingness outside. Picard orders the ship on a return course, but they find that they cannot escape. They leave a stationary beacon behind them only to have it reappear ahead of them again. So this is like some Blair Witch Project in space. Like you're leaving this beacon, you're going straight away from it, and then it's in front of you all of a sudden. Like this episode to me just reads like a bad fever dream. Like it's just scary and it feels like a nightmare and you're trapped in this void and you're trying to escape, and no matter how fast you run, like you can't get out of it. Like, oh, this one was like high anxiety.
The only thing we were missing in this episode is like when you run and the corridor gets longer and longer and you never get out. That's like basically what they were doing in space, right? They're like at warp 8, at warp 9, and the corridor's just getting longer and longer and there's no exit.
Yes, it's this one to me. It was just like a bad fever dream. I do have some trivia about this episode. So this episode is shot almost exclusively on the bridge, which I didn't notice until I actually read about it. So the director, Winrich Kolbe, and I don't know if I'm saying his or her name correctly, but it's spelled Winrich. So it sounds like Winrich to me. So the director said
probably
Winrich, maybe. I don't know. If you are the director, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. I really am. Yes. So I never said I was great at saying names. Okay. So the challenge was to make the show visually interesting while shooting 5 days on the bridge set. So, it's a male. So he noted, quote, "The bridge is intriguing when you step on it for the first time and look around for about 10 minutes, but then it becomes an utter crashing bore because it's nothing but tan walls and a few twinkling lights. I did a lot of choreography on that show. It's probably the script that had the most notes of where the actors move, every single step, which I rarely do. I usually like the actors to drive themselves where they have to go, but on something like Where Silence Has Leased, you have to keep the camera constantly moving, and that was a hell of a challenge. I spent a lot of time on that bridge on my belly, hanging down from the rafters, and on other positions to try to figure out what I could do with the camera. I've taken that from Captain's Logs, the unauthorized complete Trek voyages by Edward Gross and Mark A. Altman. So that's a book that you can pick up. And they do go pretty deep divey on a lot of these episodes, but I thought that was interesting reading that before I watched the episode to review it and realizing like, holy crap, they're on the bridge all the time. Like, except for just a couple of times where like Worf and Riker are on the Yamato, which wasn't really the Yamato, but like they were on the bridge the entire time almost.
Yeah, and I didn't even notice that. And we'll put a link to that book in the show notes. So if you go to our website to thetngpodcast.com, you'll be able to see a link to the captain's log. But yeah, I didn't even realize that until you just said that the entire episode was on the bridge. Interesting.
Yeah, it was just
the opening scene of the hologram, the holodeck.
Yeah, it was just a couple of teeny tiny little bits where they're in main engineering and then Captain is in his quarters. But really, it's like 95% of the episode is on the bridge. Do you have any like overarching thoughts or feelings about this episode before we really like go into the like shot by shot?
I mean, this episode was just not that great. I didn't really love it. I didn't really hate it either. it was neutral for me, which is actually not good, right? It was like very lukewarm, and I would rather have it be hot or cold. I'd rather be like, oh my gosh, this was like the greatest episode ever, or be like, oh my gosh, this was so stupid. But when it's just very like meh, you're kind of like, I don't even know what to say about this. It's just kind of meh. So we'll see how this episode goes.
I agree. For me, it was a really forgettable episode. And I felt like, we're opening season 2. I'm really excited that we're leaving season 1 behind. And then you hit Where Silence Has Lease, and it feels like a season 1 episode all over again. I think the overall idea is very, very cool, though, where this vastly superior being is kind of like just poking at the Enterprise and poking at humans to kind of just like find out more about them. But it's done in such a way that like it's just anxiety producing, like you're in this black void, you can't ever leave. Like that to me has shades of another episode that I think is also in season 2 called The Royale, where they're like trapped in that like hotel and can never leave. And that like anytime characters are trapped and can never leave, I'm immediately like, I don't like this. I don't like this feeling, because I feel like it's a very visceral human instinct to not be trapped, right? Like that,
totally.
that to me, like it reads as like you're really tapping into like our very primal instinct to like escape a trap.
Right. And what's terrible about being trapped anywhere is terrifying, which is why zombie movies are always so scary. Because inevitably you will be trapped. But what's scary about this is that a starship is just like a submarine, basically.
Yes.
But in space. So equally terrifying being trapped in a submarine where you're like, crap, like I can't leave. We're so far down in the ocean. It's like being trapped in space. Where the heck are you supposed to go? It's not like you could run upstairs or, anything like that. So yeah, I totally hear you. Being trapped is always a good plot device.
Yes, it is. And especially the way that they sort of talk about, once they kind of understand it's like some sort of superior intelligence that's like fucking with them. It's like we're like rats in a laboratory, and I was like, oh god, yeah, like you really, really are. So that aspect I thought was cool, but the execution itself wasn't my favorite. All right, so this episode opens with Picard coming out of his ready room and then kind of doubling back and sort of seeming to be very uncertain. And Troy speaks to him about his worry, and he said that he's worried for both Riker and Worf. And I feel like this was just like false buildup, because they were on the holodeck. We didn't know that until minutes later, but it's like you never worry about a staff member going into the holodeck to do any kind of exercise. Like that seemed very out of character. However, I think that was just really for the audience to feel like, oh my god, what's going to happen? Only to be like, oh, it's just some stupid thing. So Worf and Riker are on some planet, ? And weird stuff is about to happen, ? And then these monsters jump out. And I thought did you notice Riker's extremely awkward pole swing? He like jumped on a pole and kind of spiraled down.
I didn't, but I did not, but I did notice Worf's really weird glove with a giant thumbnail.
Yeah.
And I was like, it does look futuristic. It does. But I'm not getting the point of that giant nail.
No.
Like, it's just not functional. I don't get it.
So he picks up the glove, and it's a trap because this like thing swings down and he misses him by a millimeter. And then these monsters come out, and Riker's like, I'll help you, because he's up top somehow. Like, there's sort of a pit.
Yeah.
And he grabs this pole and like swings around it so badly. I mean, honestly, Shereese, I bust out laughing, rewinded it, rewatched it, and busted out laughing a second time. It was so guys, if you are watching this episode or haven't seen it yet, seriously watch that little moment. And I was like, what the hell? Then this like monster battle proceeds where Worf is fighting this like green alien, and Riker's stunt double is fighting this other alien, which is like super obvious that it's not Riker. But then it's like, okay, computer pause program or whatever. It's like, oh, you're on the holodeck. Okay.
Yeah. And it turns out that this whole thing is like a workout for Worf. This is just like how he does his exercise. So like in the beginning, when Worf and Riker are kind of stalking through the woods, and Riker's got like these perfectly placed streaks of dirt on his face.
Yes.
He's gotten dirty. I just thought to myself, maybe they should have changed their clothes before they came to do this. Because why are they still in their uniforms if they're doing this like dirty walk through the jungle, like whatever?
Yes. And it's their exercises. There are costumes for exercises. We've already seen that. We've already seen like Tasha Yar and Worf in their Parisi squares, blue and black outfits. Like, and then later, when Worf
for the Tai Chi,
when Worf teaches like his Klingon Tai Chi, they have robes.
But we saw Yar with her Tai Chi robe on back in Code of Honor as well.
Oh, you're right.
So we're like they have other types of clothes, and then also so when I first saw them in the woods together, I thought, oh, maybe this is one of Worf's like Klingon rights, because the Riker-Worf friendship, kind of like the Geordi Data friendship or the Yar and Wesley friendship, was kind of like preordained. So I was like, oh, maybe this is like a special like Klingon right, but he needs like a second in command with him, or a best friend. And so this is some kind of special ritual that he's invited Riker into. And I thought, that's really cool. That's really special. And then he's just like, oh, this is my workout. And like, this is the only one that I'm willing to share with outsiders. My other workouts are way too personal or too vulnerable. I was like, what are you even talking about?
See, even that I completely agree with. That's not a thing. Also, even if you base this on like military, like these are uniforms, like you do PT in like your PT clothes. You don't wear your uniform. Yeah, you're right.
It's
so
like
you're
gym.
right.
It's like you go to gym and you change into your gym clothes.
Yeah, you're right. So they get out of the holodeck, and very, very quickly they find that there's this kind of like black hole, sort of like void in space. And there seems to be no dimensions to it. They launch a probe into it. It disappears immediately. Worf is quickly spooked and wants to go to yellow alert. And did you notice there was kind of that cool little back and forth where Picard is like, why should we go to yellow alert? And Worf is like, I'm sorry, I overreacted. He's like, Worf, this is only going to work if like my staff communicates with me. I actually really want to know why. And he did it in such a great way. He wasn't calling him out to make him feel stupid. Picard genuinely wanted to know why are you spooked so quickly?
Yeah, I love that too. His line was, this starship operates best when my officers share with me what's on their minds. And I was like, wow, this is a really excellent leader. Right.
Yes.
And this is one of the things, and we've mentioned before, but this is one of the things I love about TNG is that whenever anybody has any suspicion of anything goofy going on the ship, they always take them seriously. They're always taken seriously.
Yes.
And I just like really, really appreciate it. It's refreshing because that's not like how normal life is. Usually you dismiss people. You're like, no, you're just making that up. Oh, that's just you or whatever.
Yes.
They never do that. And Picard is just really leading the charge here to be like, no, something has made you say yellow alert. I want to hear what it is. It may be important. And it turned out to be very important.
I feel like if Captain Picard were the president of the United States, we would have nipped this COVID situation right in the bud. He would have been like, Dr. Fauci over here, chief medical officer, is telling me that there's a big problem. We're just going to go ahead and go with that. Like, I wish you were in charge. Captain Picard, where are you? So they try to launch these probes into this void, and they disappear immediately, which for me, I was with Worf. I was like, yes, we're going to yellow alert this. Also, stop
and back up.
approaching. Yeah, stop approaching it. Wesley, we don't need you to be like, we can actually get even closer. You know what? You're too close already. Back up.
That's exactly what I thought. I was just thinking to myself, like, now would you move closer to a black hole that just sucked in two probes into nothingness? I know I wouldn't. It's like looking over the edge of some terrible cliff and you're like, hey, a few things just fell over that cliff and never came back. I wonder what's down there. It's like, no.
I couldn't agree with you more. My initial was like, don't get close. Like, I was practically yelling at the TV, like, don't get closer to it. That's a terrible idea. Wesley, you're demoted to like whatever's less than ensign, to nothing. Go back to the schoolroom and play with your crayons. Like, this was a very bad idea. So for some reason, Pulaski decides to like flounce on up to the bridge, and she and Picard are both kind of telling Data like magnified by 10, by 100, by 1,000, by 10,000. And the scary thing, so this void kind of encircles them. Sorry.
Yeah. So the void sucks them in.
Yeah.
Without them moving because they were too close. But, we do find out later on that this was like an intelligence behind it, and it would have sucked them in regardless because it was messing with them. But at the time we didn't know that. So they're too close to the edge. They fall over the edge. They enter into this nothingness void. And now they're like, uh-oh. And here's the scariest part. Somehow the void blocks comm channels. I was like, oh, here we go again.
Shit. You've just gotten into a really bad situation.
Yes.
With no way out and
with no cell phone reception. Like, terrifying. But then they get the comms up and working right after the commercial break, so yay for that. Pulaski saunters on the deck, on the bridge. We don't know why, but she just shows up. She's like, hey guys, what's going on in here? And
it's like Troy and Haven. It's like Worf in the we're
coming of age. Yeah.
Coming of age, thank you. Yeah, it's like, wait a second.
Just pop on in.
She just she comes in. I do think this thing that to me was like very scary is no matter how much you try to magnify, you just see the same like cloudy swirls. And I was like, oh, fuck, this is not good. Then Pulaski says to Picard, it does know how to do these things, referring to Data. And I was like, God damn it, you suck so bad, so bad. And then she's like, I'm sorry, forgive me, Data. I'm not used to working with non-living, and then she kind of trails off looking at Data's face. I think she said
something like devices or something. Like I'm not
non-living devices, yeah.
Non-living devices or technology, something like that, where it's like you just
something extremely dismissive. And she kind of stops and she's like, you'll forgive me again. Your service record says that you are alive, and I must accept that. And I thought, oh my God, you sound like a parent, quote unquote, trying to accept that your son is gay or something, right? Where she's like, I must accept that, I guess. It's not that hard. It's not that hard to accept that your son is gay. And it's even less hard to accept that this robot is alive. Okay. Like, come on now. This to me was just so, get over yourself. Get over yourself, Pulaski.
Yeah. And why do we even care that it's so hard for you to accept? Sit down somewhere. Why are you even on the bridge? Go back to sick bay. Get out of here.
Yeah, seriously, get out of here. So that really got under my skin, which is like, your service record says you're alive, and I must accept that. And I was like,
and how she's like, oh, shut sorry. Up, Pulaski. Oh, sorry again. You're not really sorry because you just did it right away.
It's the sorry. I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt by my actions, but I have zero plans to change my actions. Like, correct. Okay, so then you're not sorry at all.
Yep.
So they try to get underway, at first they're like, oh, cool. Like nobody's ever explored this. We're kind of in this black void. Let's sort of poke around. Right. And then they realize like, oh, communications have been like cut off. They can't really seem to like move much. So then I don't remember if it was Picard or Riker, but one of them was like, you know what? We've kind of been here long enough. Like a scientific like ship can come and check this out, which I thought that's what the Enterprise was, right? Like exploration.
That's what I thought too. But whatever. They do that sometimes because it is the flagship vessel. So it's a science vessel, but it's also like armed.
Military. Yeah.
It's also like a battleship versus their science vessels that they refer to seem to have no arms. Like they'll like in future episodes they'll be like, oh, science vessel was calling with a distress call, and they'll be like, we can't defend ourselves. We're just a science vessel. So I think because they're the flagship, they are a science vessel plus.
Yeah, I think you are right about that. But they're like, we could just send like a science vessel to come and check this out. So they try to leave and they can't. And then now begins like this nightmare. And they send a beacon.
We have this epic 80s soundtrack going on as soon as they hit reverse and it doesn't work. It's just like, din it. And I was like, oh, I love it. I love it. It's just memories.
I feel like we need you to just do the sound effects because you make like the good like bum 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 bum. That's what I did for the neutral zone. Dum dum.
That's what it was. Oh, so good. It's so good.
Yeah, no, it was really really good. So they try to like back up, they try to go forward, and then they have this moment where I was like, oh no, right? Like that was in my notes because they left a stationary beacon. Yes. You can hear it going. As they get further away from it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, there's something up ahead. And they've gone in a straight line.
Yes.
So there's something up ahead. And it's like, boop, boop, boop. It's the same beacon, the same one they left. I'm like, oh, fuck, you guys are going around in circles while going straight. Like, this is where, like, haven't we all had sort of fever dreams like this at some point when you have the flu and you have these horrible nightmares? This is what, then, oh my God, a Romulan warbird decloaks? Like,
yes. And it had to decloak because the Romulans threatened that they would be back at the end of season 1. They were gonna be back. They're gonna be back. So we had to have some Romulans in here somewhere. So we get this ship decloaking, and you're like, oh no, it's the Romulans. Maybe they're behind everything, but we still don't actually see Romulans. And it turns out that was all fake. So we still don't really see the Romulans come back.
You know what? I did not catch that was a callback to the neutral zone. That's why there's 2 of us.
Yeah.
Because I was like, ooh, warbird, cool. But like, I didn't think like, oh yeah, they did say like, we're back.
Yeah. And then disappear completely. Yeah. But the ship is super cool and their decloaking technology is so cool. And every time they do that scene, I don't care how many times I see it. It's always like, wow.
Also the decloaking sound effect, so effing cool. Like, what's about to happen when you hear that like sound.
Yeah.
Because you hear it. And then all of a sudden there's a ship. I'm like, oh crap. So the Romulan warbird fires on them. Picard orders them to fire back. One shot and they destroy this whole huge ship. And he's like, that was too easy. And then like just this continuing like strange series of events is happening. Like the USS Yamato appears in the void also. They try hailing, but there's no answer.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, what were you thinking?
Sent Riker and Worf over there, I was kind of like, that Romulan ship wasn't real. One torpedo is not going to destroy an entire freaking warbird. It's not going to destroy anything besides a shuttle or something like that. It sure
won't.
So I was just like, and maybe it won't even destroy a shuttle. So I was like, okay, so this whole thing is fake. So when the next ship came and I knew it was fake and they sent Riker and Worf over there, I thought, I don't know why I thought this because they're not going to do this, but I thought they were going to beam them into space because I was like, that's not a real ship. So if you beam them out, they're just going to be beamed into space and like you're going to kill them. But like, I don't know why I thought that because of course they're not going to do that. But they beamed them onto this ship and then I'm like, that ship.
Remember what was the episode we did with the electricity monster where Picard beams his body out to space and he still doesn't die after multiple minutes?
Lonely Among Us?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes.
So it could have been something like that.
Yeah, that's true. They could have like melded with the energy monster and then not died. Sure. But yeah, so that's what I was afraid. And then when they were on the ship, the whole time, like the second they got on the ship, I kept thinking like any second this ship is going to dissolve into thin air. And again, they're going to be in space. So I was just like, get back to the ship, get back to the ship, get back to the Enterprise, stop exploring. And then when they were like beamed on separately, I was like, oh crap.
Yes. When they were, okay. So they're beamed into separate parts of the ship and immediately you can tell that something is wrong. Not only is the ship completely empty, but like everything is kind of dark. Like I just thought how that scene gave off major creepy vibes. And I thought it was actually good writing in that they're like, oh, it's the Yamato, it's our sister ship, which is built exactly the same as the Enterprise.
Which I thought was so smart.
Yeah, they didn't have to build no new sets. Like they just empty the corridors, darken the lights, and bam, you're on the Yamato.
I thought that was a stroke of genius. I was like, sister ship? Since when does it have a sister ship? That's so smart because you don't have to build another set. And I totally bought it. I was like, okay.
But you know what? It follows naval tradition because Navy ships are given sister ships as well. So they're continuing like this naval tradition in space, which I thought was really
And like,
cool.
Why would you reinvent the wheel? Like all their ships kind of look the same. Like from the outside, they all have this Enterprise-y shape, even though they're bigger or smaller or whatever.
Even if like the nacelles are kind of in different spots, right? Like it has like a disc and it has nacelles. So anyway, yeah. So they get on. It's clearly not the Yamato. I love that Riker tricorders the ship and he says these walls are not made of titanium, so this can't be the Yamato. It's not a Federation ship, which I was like, cool. They have all their ships have titanium. It was super cool. So, oh my God, now we've got some weird shit happening though, because hallways are leading into doorways to other hallways, which never happens. Like they basically go into the transporter room, but it's not the transporter room. It's a hallway that leads to somewhere else. And I was like, oh no. Worf hears Riker screaming. Riker hears Worf screaming, but none of them have screamed. It's like, oh my God, what the fuck is happening? Yes. And then the worst part for me, which I was, it's even thinking about it makes me anxious. They go into the bridge and all the doorways lead to other bridges. And I was like, oh my God, you've got other bridges. Like, don't go through that doorway. You're going to like disappear.
Yeah. So first of all, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's the same bridge over and over and over and they're going in a loop because that's usually the movie trope. However, the other part of the movie trope was inevitably one of the two people, they notice that it's a loop. And so they go through the doors and the doors close and then the two are separated forever. Yeah. And you're like, no. So as Worf was like, wait, I can see you, Riker, through this door into the next bridge. So it's one bridge. I was just like, Worf, you are way too close to the door. Do not go into that door because it's going to close behind you. And then you guys are going to be separated. But thankfully he went through the door. It did close behind him, but he came in through the other door on the other side.
Oh my God. In my notes, I wrote, it's time to buddy up and hold hands because you don't want to get separated. If I were ever in that situation, I'd be like, we need to hold hands or link arms or something and keep physical contact because we cannot get separated. Because then, yeah, you're going to die there.
Yeah, terrifying. This was a really good, this scene I really enjoyed. Even though the episode overall, I was kind of like, meh. But this scene, I was like, this is legit scary. Like, this is a terrifying situation to be in.
Yes. You know, I think it was a terrifying situation. For me, it was the most memorable of the scenes of this episode. I like you, I think this episode is sort of forgettable, but this was like super memorable. I thought it was so for me in the worst way because it triggered so much anxiety for me. Did you notice when they were on the bridge, the normal bridge sound that the Enterprise has, they put that on the Yamato and then like distorted the sound.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah,
They made it even creepier?
Well, they made it a slightly distorted sound. The effects supervisors distorted the regular Enterprise bridge ambient sound to make it even more so like in your subconscious, like realize like this is not the normal ship. Something like, is off right about this ship. Something is not right. So it was like, it was a very similar sound, but I only picked it up because I had read that before I watched the episode. And I was like, yeah, it's just off by a little bit, but it's enough that you really notice like, this is not the Yamato. So now we have this conundrum though. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that one of the things that I thought was the power's acting fishy. Let's not take the turbo lifts. Like whenever they're like, oh yeah, let's get on the turbo. Like when they came to the bridge, when Riker and Worf came to the bridge, they were like, wait, this shouldn't be here. The bridge should be 4 decks above us. And we're like in the wrong hallway or whatever. I was just like, please do not get on a turbo lift because that never turns out well either in these haunted house scenarios.
Never.
And then we go back to the Enterprise and Geordi's like, I can't get the engineering. Like I can't raise them on the comms. I'm going to go down there. And he goes to get on the turbo lift. And I was like, no, Jeffrey's tubes only, people.
Yes.
Like, don't trust, like if the technology's fishy, like don't transport, don't do any of that. I don't know. All that definitely gave me anxiety, but for nothing. Like they didn't do anything with those, but I was waiting for it.
They could have. Yeah, they really could have. Honestly, I think that it's like 20th century common sense. Like if there's a fire, don't use the elevator.
Exactly.
Come on, guys, don't get in the turbo lift. Come on, don't do that. But yeah, you're right. So the star fix is what they're calling it. It's kind of like a little gap in this void appears and you can see stars through it. And the ensign is like, let's go, right? And Picard is like, damn it, like, let's get a lock on my away team and get them back, and then we can get the hell out of here. And they couldn't get a lock. They couldn't get a lock. And so
poor Chief O'Brien, which by the way, we see Chief O'Brien for the first time in episode 1 of this season. And I was so excited to see Chief O'Brien.
Oh.
Yeah, we get all of our new characters in like episode 1 of season 2. I was so excited to see Chief O'Brien because I didn't realize that I hadn't seen him in all of season 1. I didn't realize he wasn't there until he was. And I was like, oh, we've got our transporter chief. Woo. We didn't have a transporter chief before. And no, he becomes like a big character. It was just whoever was there, or people just walking in saying, hey guys, or like Yar would do it sometimes. It was just, Wesley could do it. Anybody could just go in there and push the buttons. But now we have a transporter chief who, anyway, so we go to O'Brien and he's like, hold
on a second though. Let's think about this. People are not transporting that much often on the ship. Like, what do you do the rest of the time? Like, do you just stand there in an empty room, like waiting for somebody to walk in to be like, I need you to transport me? What's your other job?
I think what O'Brien does from like in the future is he's just part of the engineering team. And his like main job is to make sure the transporters are always working. So he's part of engineering. He's like always like he's in engineering. He's doing stuff with them. But if they need somebody transported, or more likely if something's fishy, like someone gets transported and gets lost, or there's a electric storm and they can't get somebody through or anything like that, then they call in the big guns. When somebody can't just push the buttons, then he comes in and he like takes apart the transporter pads and he like screws in, he like does all that. He's like the technician.
Okay. But see, that would make more sense to have him be like an engineer that happens to specialize in transport, because I thought, what do you do the rest of the time? First of all, there's 20 transporter rooms, but only people transport like every 4 days. One person transports. Really don't even need that. So you're just standing in an empty room, like waiting for people to walk in. What are you doing?
Playing solitaire on their panels.
And then when Captain Picard walks in, like very quickly switching it over so it looks like a regular touchpad. Yes. He's playing Pac-Man. Anyway, he's playing with shit, like he's putting like a water bottle like on the transport pad and just transporting it off and on like to different pads, like Spot the cat, like all these weird, just trying to transport shit off and on just to like have things to do. Anyway, so they can't get out because Picard doesn't want to leave Riker and Worf behind, obviously. Good call.
And we've got Ensign Haskell here.
Yes.
Who is like the most popular meme I've ever seen in my life is actually Ensign Haskell.
Really?
On the bridge when he gets like electrocuted or whatever. Or it looks like
he's
he's getting
doing this thing with his
electrocuted.
face.
When he's doing the thing with his face. Yeah, that's like the most common Star Trek TNG meme I've seen is that. And as soon as I saw his face in this episode, I was like, this is where the meme comes from. So I was waiting for that scene for it to happen.
I've seen the memes. I have literally never seen any Ensign Haskell memes ever. I need to.
Oh my goodness.
Especially after reviewing this episode, I need to keep an eye out for it. But yeah, so he's Ensign
like,
Haskell.
Forget them. We need to get out of here.
Yeah. And Picard, thank God, is like, no. So they finally get a lock on. You know, Riker and Worf have already been through like the multiple loops of the bridge, the non-titanium walls, all this screaming and shit. Yeah, so they already know that something is wrong. So they end up beaming. They finally get a lock on them and they beam them back to the bridge. And I love that Riker comes back like pissed. I don't know if you've noticed on the bridge, he's like, just what the hell is going on? You know, he's really good at saying, what the hell is going on?
And he says it to Picard as if like Picard did something. I know he wasn't mad at Picard, but he said it at Picard.
Yes.
Like, what is going on here? Like,
he sure did. Not only that, but like, I was waiting for Picard to be like, excuse me. Who's in charge here?
Like stand down, like, number one, but he didn't. He was just like, I don't know what's going on.
And he did a flurry with his hands, and he's like, let's use all this technology and get out of here. And like sits down in a huff. I was like, okay, Riker, okay.
He's had enough of a ghost ship and screaming and looping bridges. He was done with
Romulan warbirds. Yeah, he was done with all of it. But at one point, so he's like, let's use all this technology, get the hell out of here. So these star fixes keep like appearing, and no matter how fast they get to them, they disappear before they can even like engage the engine. And so thankfully, the one time ever that Pulaski is helpful, actually that's not fair, she's helpful in other episodes, but for the first time she's helpful instead of just being an asshole to Data. She's like, if I didn't know any better, I would think that this is a lab experiment. Like, if I were working in a lab, I would offer a bunch of different stimuli to like my lab rats or whatever and see what they do with it. Mm-hmm. And so that was actually really helpful because they're like, you know what? We're going to stop responding to the stimuli. And as soon as they stop responding, this like super creepy amphibious face appears. Named
I really
Nagilum.
like that makeup. I have a feeling something happened where they couldn't finish the entire makeup job on this alien. Or maybe they could, I don't know. But I really like
CGI though.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. It was weird, but I really like that they picked an amphibian alien. For some reason, I really like amphibian aliens. I don't know. They just seem so like amphibians in space. It seems so weird. So I was like, okay, I like that he's more like an amphibian look. This is a look we haven't seen often before. So he pops up. It is weird that he's like kind of like half of like his face is squeezing through some
sort of voidy something.
Know.
Yeah, it was definitely weird. I would love to know how they actually made that. If it was like CGI face or like makeup-y with like it had to be something with CGI, but I have a little deep dive on Nagilum or the naming. It's not a big deep dive, but it's a little tidbit. So the character was named after an actor, Richard Mulligan, who the TNG like executive producer Maurice Hurley originally wanted to cast in that role. And for some reason he wasn't able to do it. So Nagilum is Mulligan spelled backwards.
Oh.
Trying to do it, name it after Richard Mulligan.
That's quite clever. I like that.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, so Nagilum is Mulligan spelled backwards. So Nagilum sort of pops up on the screen once the Enterprise is like, they pull a Picard and they're like, I'm not playing your game anymore. Mm-hmm. Which is very Picard.
Yep.
And he appears and he's curious about the species. He notices that Data's construction is like different from everybody else's. And then he notices, I thought this was funny, he notices that Pulaski is different as well in what he says construction.
Right. But not Troy, which I thought was kind of weird.
Right? So he does say like, you're different in construction, and then makes her kind of like dance around to the wall, which I thought was what would be the purpose of that? He just kind of like puppet stringed her body around, but like didn't really learn anything more about her. I don't know. But she says, okay, well, I'm female and this is how like our species propagate. And I love that he goes, demonstrate that for me. And she's like, no. And I thought if Beverly were there, she'd be like, well, I mean, I guess we could, Jean-Luc.
No, she wouldn't. She'd be like, Nagilum, that is none of your business. My business is my business. And it has nothing to do with you. Next question.
That's true. She probably would have done that, but I thought this is where we could build the sexual tension between like Dr. Crusher and Picard. But with Pulaski, it's like, nah, hard pass. Like,
hard pass on that.
So he's curious, and then he was like, oh yes, I understand. Okay, now I sort of get it. And then he says, you are finite beings, so you kind of just stop existing at one point. And they're like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, you call this thing death. And then he kills Ensign Haskell, and that's where that like,
yeah,
I still have to see the memes.
From. Yep.
But he basically like explodes his brain, I guess. And he goes,
rest in peace, Haskell.
Poor Haskell. He goes, that's cool. All right, so I'm going to need to kill about a third of your crew, maybe half, to like understand. I'm going to just kill them in all sorts of inventive ways. Mm-hmm. And I went, what do you do now? Like this all-powerful being that has you trapped is like, I need to kill about half of your crew, maybe a third, maybe half.
Yeah.
What do you do? Yeah. What do you even do?
And he's also just kind of like, yeah, because I just want to explore it. I'm just kind of curious about it. So that's what I'm going to do. And I love that Picard is just like, you know what? Self-destruct. Because I did say, like, in a previous episode where I was like, Picard never does that. And one of our special guests, Spencer Rogers, was like, yeah, he does do that a couple times. I was like, nah, not him. He wouldn't self-destruct the ship. And this is actually the second time we see Picard trying to self-destruct. And what's so interesting is that we need this, like, two-person system where him and Riker have to both agree to self-destruct the ship and all that stuff. Because by the time we get to Voyager, that's a one-woman show. Anytime she wants to just self-destruct, she just goes computer, self-destruct, 10 seconds, and it just does it. Like, it just straight up does it. So I thought this was interesting that
they've done some updates for sure. There is a continuity issue with the auto-destruct sequence. So I hate having to say this episode name so many times. In 11001001, the computer only gives 5 minutes as the only choice for the auto-destruct sequence. And so now the computer says, how much time do you want? Mm-hmm. And then, they kind of have Riker and Picard have this little moment where they're like, do we want to just get this over with quickly? Do we want to like give families time to prepare? And then Riker's like, how about a nice round number, like 20 minutes? And I went, are you fucking serious, Riker? You think 20 minutes is enough time for like families? It takes 20 minutes to get from like the bottom of the ship to the top. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. There's not enough time. 20 minutes. And that's
the thing is like, it's like by the time we get to Voyager, when they do self-destruct, it's always 10 seconds or like sometimes it's 1 minute, but it's never more than 1 minute. Like they do it real quick. They're just like self-destruct now, basically.
Yeah.
And you have to like act really fast if you want the captain to change their mind. And so I think they're still just like playing around with what self-destruct would really look like. What would it be like? I don't even know if this is a thing on Navy vessels, like in real life right now. I don't know if there's any way for them to destroy their technology so the enemy doesn't get it.
I really don't know. I
don't know either. Cause like, where do they even get this idea? But they're playing around with like, how would that look and how would it go? And I want to ask you, would you rather self-destruct or would you hope that you'll be one of the 1/3, 2/3 or 1/2 of the crew that would survive?
That's a really good question. And you know what? I don't think I even could give an answer. I don't know. I think I would hope that if I were Picard, I would just hope that I wasn't one of the half or third that were killed. But at the same time, as a captain, you now have to deal with allowing your crew to be killed. And then the aftermath of that, like contacting those families, letting them know that their loved ones are dead at like, which is really at your hand, not, indirectly. Whereas,
but you made that choice.
Yes, you made that choice. Whereas Picard is like, fuck this. Like you're taking away all my choices. So I'm going to create a new choice, which is not one that any of us want. Yeah. I'm not playing your game. It's a lose-lose. Like we lose because we die, but you also lose and we're out of the situation. So I don't know.
Because now you don't have a plaything. So it's like two things. If you were on the crew, you'd be like, well, shoot, I hope I'm one of the ones that survive. But being the captain, he doesn't have that luxury to just be like, well, I just hope I survive. Being the captain, his decisions will determine what happens next. I would totally self-destruct the ship. Totally. Like as awful as that is, I'd be like, no, we're not playing this game. Like it'd be the third option. Like, I'm not just going to let you slaughter the crew. I mean, at the end, we all die, which is worse than half of us dying. But at least we're not being toyed with and like tortured to death. Like, it's going to be quick and it's going to be done.
And I think the other thing too, and the reason that you do not negotiate with terrorists is because once you negotiate with them once and allow them to sort of have their way, they'll keep coming back again and again and again. And so you're never going to fully be free of Nagilum, who, let's say he's already done all his death experiments and you're one of the 2/3 that are surviving.
Right.
Who's to say he's going to let you go at that point? Then he's going to keep you for like other stuff. Yeah. At that point, it's like, we're done. We're done playing this game. We're not doing this. That's why in theory, you're not supposed to like negotiate with like kidnappers and all that kind of stuff, because they're going to just keep coming back and like torturing you for like more and more and more. So they do choose. That's a good choice though. They do choose to do the auto destruct 20 minutes. Here's a question. Why does Picard go to his quarters to like read? Aren't you needed at your station at this most critical time? Like, the captain goes down with the ship. Why aren't you at your post? Why are you reading a book?
It's weird because they do this like, okay, let's give everybody 20 minutes to say goodbye. And he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have anybody to go back to. So he kind of does something that he really enjoys for the last 20 minutes of his life. It's like, well, this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. I'm going to spend it like doing something I love, which is just kind of sitting and reading and being a scholar. You know, while other people are hugging their kids and poor Wesley now doesn't have mom on board. So that sucks. But while people are kind of like, you know, saying goodbye, I'm sure Riker and Troy are cuddled up. It's like Picard's just like, all right, I'm just going to like read a book and just ride this out. It's just a terrible situation to be in. It's just terrible all around. So then we have Troy and Data come into Picard's private space.
Yes.
You know, and it's kind of like, okay, that's weird. And then Data starts asking about the nature of death. Like, what does that mean?
What is death?
Which actually is a very Data thing to ask.
Very.
But like in this time and place, as soon as he asked it, I was like, nope, this is a trick. This is Nagilum. Because even though Data would ask a question like that, and maybe even in a time like this, I don't think he wouldn't come to the captain's quarters to have this conversation. He would have just asked it on the bridge as soon as it was like, we're going to self-destruct, blah, blah, blah. He would have been like, okay, do you think self-destructing is going to be better? Like, he would have just said it then.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is creepy. And then when Troy came in and they were both so like rigid and just like robotic, like even more so than Data usually is, I was like, nope, this is a trap. Don't tell them anything, Picard.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, obviously the dead giveaway is they both called Picard Jean-Luc, which right off the bat was like, nope. I did think it was a very Data thing to ask, and I could actually, I disagree with you. I could see him totally coming to the captain to ask, but I could see him coming to anybody to ask what death is.
Yeah.
Geordi or Troy or Riker or Worf or anybody. I could see him talking to anybody. Didn't necessarily need to come to the captain's quarters for that. But asking what is death, I thought, my first question was like, how much time you got, buddy? And then I was like, 20 minutes. That's all you got. Because this is a question that could take ages to answer. But I did like Picard's answer that like, to some, it just means like returning to the singularity, or to some, it means like just the end of any sort of existence. And it's like nothingness. And, you know, so that was a little poetic and cool. A little tidbit, when Picard is in his quarters, he's listening to a musical piece. I know I'm going to butcher the name. It's a composition called Gymnopédie, I think. And it's this like very classic, like sort of piano, like soft sort of like classical piece, but it actually, the meaning behind it, it's by I believe a French composer, and it means like sadness and death or something like that. Yikes. So they definitely found this like melancholic, like classical piece for Picard to listen to. And I love classical music, and I have a whole playlist of it that I use when I like study or work or whatever. And that's one of the pieces on there. So I heard it and I was like, I know what that is. Like, I didn't know the name of it, and I'm certain I butchered the pronunciation, so I'm sorry. But I was like, oh, cool. That's like just like a nice like overture towards like the theme of like death and like the end of existence. That was kind of cool.
Kind of like in the Titanic when the band is like playing.
Yes.
And the movie, as the ship is like slowly sinking, and they're just still like playing this slow, sad music, and you're like, but why? Yeah. Kind of like that.
I agree. So it's clear that these two are doppelgangers, because they call him Jean-Luc, and he's like, I'm on to you, Nagilum. I'm not playing your game again for the 20th time. Right? Like, he has said Picard has done the equivalent of 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm not playing anymore, like 10 times this episode. Like, how many more times can he quit playing your game? But as soon as he says, I'm not playing, the doppelganger, Troy, and Data disappear. And the real Data immediately calls from the bridge and reports that they're out of the void. So everybody's like, cool, now we can like terminate the auto destruct. And Picard is not having it.
And we can live. Because he was just fooled like 10 seconds ago by Nagilum.
Yeah. So he's like, this could be a trap. This could be, which I think is fine. But he leaves it to like 10 seconds. So he orders the ship to move away at high speed.
Yeah. Get the heck out of here.
Yeah. It's only when they're finally satisfied, when he's finally satisfied that they're out of the void, does he cancel the self-destruct. But there's like 0.01 seconds left on that countdown. I was like, dang, you left it to like the last second, literally.
You know what? I was with Picard. I didn't trust it either. So I would have also waited. I don't know if I would have waited to the last second, but I would have, I don't know. I also did not trust that they were really out of the void. I thought that was another trick.
Totally could have been.
I also thought though, if Nagilum is all powerful, couldn't he just turn off the self-destruct? So I was kind of like,
oh yeah, you're right.
So he could have
he really could have just kept them there indefinitely.
He could have turned it on or turned it off or whatever. It was what I was thinking. So I was like, even if Picard's like, yay, we're out, cancel self-destruct, that Nagilum would be like, suckers, turn it back on, and just like mess with them. So I was waiting for that too. I was just like, this is a trap, or Nagilum's just gonna like come in and turn it back on or turn it off or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know why Nagilum felt like he had to get Picard to turn off the self-destruct. I felt like he should have been powerful enough to
He could have done that himself. Well, this begs the question though, even without Nagilum saying like, hey, I'm going to kill half of your crew, maybe 2/3, or kill a third of your crew, maybe a half. Even if he wasn't experimenting with death and was keeping you, let's say you were Picard, keeping you and your ship hostage, what would you do? Would you just self-destruct right away?
No, I would definitely not I would not self-destruct if he was doing something else that wasn't torture and death. Mm-hmm. If it was just like, I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on the scenario, but the reason why I was like totally on board with Picard's call was because he was threatening torture and death. It was like, you can either die slowly and painfully, and we will never know when, we'll never know who, so like the whole anticipation of it, we'll either die that way or we can die on our own terms. But either way, you're going to die. That's what I saw. But if there was a third option where we're not dying, then there's like an opportunity for negotiation, or like maybe we just let him experiment, or like there would have been other avenues. And I would not have been so quick to self-destruct for sure if it was a different scenario. But this guy was just like a masochist. And so then, okay.
And only out of like just pure curiosity too. He's like, I'm just curious about death. And I'm like, if you're all powerful, why don't you just like access the ship's main computer and just like download its like information in your quarters.
So he gets released, and then they're like, okay, well, I guess we're really free. That's great. And so he goes so Picard goes back into his ready room, and Nagilum pops onto his screen, and he's just like, why'd you let us go? And he's like, oh, I learned everything I needed to. And I was kind of like, but you didn't though. Cause didn't you just say you need to learn about death, and like, that was your whole thing? And Picard mentioned that too. He was like, I thought you wanted to see how we face death. So like that was the perfect opportunity. And he's just like, no. What I saw was good enough. I'm good. And I was kind of like, that felt like a cop out to make the episode end, because there was really no other way to get out of that.
I think it definitely did. I did really like Nagilum's analysis though of humans, and honestly that's not really fair, because there are like other aliens serving on the ship as well, but he was sort of talking about humankind in general, and he said we're like quick to judge, we're combative, we're militant. And I thought yes, and yes, like all of those things are true. And he said you're just sort of like barbarians still, and I really like, my species has nothing in common with your species. And I was like, that's a very interesting from written, when you back up a second, you realize like the analysis of humankind that Nagilum is given was obviously written by a human for the show. It's like for a human to sort of like quantify what other human, or like what humankind is like, I thought was really interesting and sort of meta in this really cool way. And I love that Picard disagrees, pointing out that their recent encounter shows that both species are curious, which is a logical statement that Nagilum concedes like before he just sort of disappears for good. And it's like, you were curious about us, which
Picard. Picard is very much a diplomat, right? So he's finding common ground even with this terrifying being that just tried to destroy them.
Yes, I love that he sort of takes charge of it too when Nagilum is on his screen in the ready room and he's like, during this time and during this encounter, you too have been evaluated. And this is what we have found about you. And I was like, ooh, Picard, way to turn the tables and be like, we have been evaluating you. And this is what we have found. You know, like you're curious, we are curious, and that's the common ground we have.
Boss move.
Yeah, it was a boss move. Oh, Picard. You're just the best. You're the best. Not to sound too much like Tasha Yar and her funeral. You are the best.
Oh, Picard. You're the best.
See you next summer. Yeah. But yeah, that was a boss move. And I love that that he really sort of took control of that situation. Took control of it. So what do you say we put a bow on the end of this episode? Because next week is like one of the best season 2 episodes of all time. And I don't know if you know which one it is, but it's Elementary Dear Data.
Oh yeah. Yay. Oh, I'm so excited.
Well, with that in mind, are you ready to move on from this one?
I feel like I've been ready since we started. Although I will say this actually is, they do have some very cool things in this episode. It's a good haunted house story.
Yes.
Perfect kind of an episode for like a Halloween type situation. So if you are listening to this anytime around Halloween, watch this episode and just like enjoy Halloween in space.
There we go. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Next week, we're talking season 2, episode 3, Elementary Dear Data. We can't wait to dive into it.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. See you next time.